I want to say anyone who gets two holes in one in 3 days,
Yeah,
which
that's a crazy.
I mean that's I've never had one.
Well, that's my wife's least favorite story. The she hates it. She says, "Please don't tell that story again." Uh, just quickly for the couple of people out there who haven't heard it. This is 5, 6 years ago, whatever it was. And at that point, my wife had four holes in one, and I had three. She's very competitive. She's a big swimmer. And on February 6th, I had another hole in one. And she's very competitive. And she said, "Well, I don't like it, but I can live with it." And 2 days later, or not the next day, but the day after that, we're out together. And I get another hole in one with Sue with me. And we're staying on the tee. And does she give me a big hug? No. Does she say, "Great shot, honey"? No. She looks at me and very appropriately says, "You've got to be shitting me," which is an absolutely appropriate reaction.
Yes, it is. Even
Yeah.
to one.
I know, I know, I know. I have nine now. It's at any rate, it's crazy. Now I get disappointed if I don't get one when I go out. It's we get, I don't know, whatever it is. So anyway, I don't want to get too far down this particular rabbit hole,
Sure.
and we won't. But currently, we're experiencing this disappointing, somewhat frightening, disturbing, chaotic, dizzying, tragic-comic moment in our history. And I was just wondering, have you seen anything or remember anything even remotely like this in our lifetimes?
No, I think this is unique. Not only is it unique, but it's much worse than the way it's being covered. I think
Uh-huh.
people in my business are just, Trump did this. This is the criticism. It's coming out plain vanilla, and it's not a plain
Uh-huh.
vanilla moment at all, in my view.
No, it is the only thing, and it doesn't really. Vietnam, at least experiencing it from the viewpoint of a college kid, et cetera, that was a crazy period
Oh,
for me. But not the sort of the degree of craziness that we're running into now. At any rate, in the spirit of trying to get you to spill your guts, how do you get people to spill their guts? How does that work?
well, it
You ask
is.
them about their holes in one. That's a good start.
Yeah, well, of course, but it's all research. You need
Okay.
to actually,
Okay.
if you're interviewing somebody and they've written an obscure article for some intellectual magazine, actually get it and read it. And if it's relevant, quote from it in asking a question.
Uh-huh.
And
Uh-huh.
I think the person will think, gee, I thought only my mother read that article.
Okay.
So you bring yourself closer to the subject you're interviewing.
Uh-huh. 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 No, that's a great tip. It's painful to have to do that much research, but but I think
No,
it
it
is.
is, but
So I
also,
have to. I'm going to have to go back then and start over. I'll call you in a couple of weeks. I think I've read most of your books, though. Not all, but most of them. You have been called. This is a little embarrassing, and it's almost plagiarism because I've seen it so many times. But you've been called the best reporter, the best American reporter, the best reporter of all time, and all that stuff. Who are some of the reporters now or in the past, your past that you admire like that you think are really, really good ones?
well, Cy Hirsch, when he worked for the New York Times and before, did the My Lai massacre story, which was really a pivot point, I think,
Uh-huh.
the country's understanding of the nightmare of
hmm
Vietnam.
hmm
Uh,
hmm
that
That's an interesting thing to me about reading nonfiction, especially. And I think sometimes we're taught in school we're supposed to memorize this information, dates and names and whatever. But to me, what I want if I read a book, or I want to understand. I want to understand I mean, that's a word you just used, but that's what I want. I want to understand something I didn't understand.
Well, you want to go where you haven't been before, and
Hmm.
that's really central. I love in your memoir one of the many things you said. It's so important to outline,
Mm.
and uh, outlining, of course, is planning. And you've got to plan if you're doing an interview. And one of the things, because I record with the permission of the person interviewed, and so I go back and read the transcripts and realize I talk too much. And
Hmm.
uh,
No,
the
I'm not agreeing with you. I'm just nodding.
yeah, no, no, it's key to listen. And I have this little kind of habit of taking this finger and, you know, sticking it in the fingernail so it hurts is a memory aid to tell me to shut the
Okay.
F up. Other
Uh-huh.
words, listen. And
Uh-huh.
I read these transcripts, and I say, and uh, my assistant Claire will look at, you're talking too much. Shut up.
Uh-huh.
And
Uh-huh.
great lessons from the CIA is let the silence suck out the truth. There's nothing more potent than silence.
Yeah, yeah. I just did an interview with the woman who wrote Gone Girl. Terrific. And I did that. I talked too much. I talked too much. I didn't let her talk as much as she should. Gillian Flynn. Very interesting. Wonderful,
Yeah,
wonderful
that's a
fiction
great
writer.
book.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But I talked too much in the interview. Going back, if you can remember this far, and sometimes I have trouble thinking back. You're in the Navy for 5 years after college. How did that affect you in terms of whatever, moving you forward or whatever you needed at that point in your life?
I felt because this was while Vietnam was escalating in the late 60s, and I didn't like the Vietnam War at all. And I felt that I was captured, that I had no freedom. And so when I got out of the Navy after 5 years, it was so liberating. And I went walked into the Washington Post and said, I'd like to work here. They gave me a 2 week tryout, which
Uh-huh.
failed. And
Tell me about that a little bit. Failing the, it's awful. Sometimes these things, they're very painful, but over time they become a little bit more humorous.
well, I never looked at it as humorous, but
Okay.
it was a lesson in because I was lucky. I walked into the Post, they gave me a 2 week tryout, and I realized I didn't know how to do the reporting, but I realized that I loved it. This is what I
Mhm.
want to do. And so that, you're on a path. Did you always want to be a writer? Did you, you have your stint with J. Walter Thompson, right?
Yeah. Yes. No, yes. I always wanted to be a writer. I just didn't feel, I didn't have the confidence to feel that I could do it.
Yeah.
So I said I better get a day job and, and we'll do that. And yeah, 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 yeah.
Yes,
I
but
still don't have the confidence. I don't know why I have the the confidence to think I can do it at this point. So how much after that first 2 weeks didn't work? So you kept going at them, and they eventually hired you for a while.
well, they said you need to learn how to do journalism because
Okay.
hadn't worked on my college newspaper, and there's certain like the editor who was interviewing me before the 2 week tryout said, "What's attribution?" And I literally did not know what
Mm-hmm.
attribution was. In other words, according to the mayor or something, according
Mm-hmm.
to an expert or according to the book. And he just flat out said, "You do not know what you're doing." And I said to him, uh, "Thank you." And he said, "Why are you thanking me?" And I said, "Because I know this is what I want to do. And I agree, I need to learn." And I went worked
Hmm.
weekly paper for a year and had some stories that the Washington Post wished they'd had, so they hired me after a year.
Hmm. 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 The now, how long had you been, or about how long had you been with the Post when you were handed you and Bernstein were handed the Watergate story to check out?
Really 9 months.
Hmm.
I was covering night police, and
Hmm.
after the Watergate burglary, where they arrested the five burglars, they sent me on a Saturday morning to the courthouse to watch them being arraigned.
Hmm.
So for the 9 months, I'd seen all kinds of burglars, but never a burglar like this, because they all had
Hmm.
business suits. In fact,
Hmm.
I'd never seen a burglar that was well dressed.
Uh,
And so I'm listening to this, and the the lead burglar, James McCord, the judge asked him where he worked, and McCord went, "See." And the judge said, "Speak up," and said, "CIA." And I was sitting in the second
oh my
row.
God. Okay. I don't know why this all strikes me as funny, but you got to laugh. Sometimes this stuff is really crazy. I have to laugh a little bit. Sorry.
Yes, exactly. But being seen, witnessing that, and just saying, "Now, wait a minute, this is not your average burglar,
Hmm.
burglary." And these five men and lead burglar had worked for the CIA. I mean, come on. I mean, it was like uh, it was being stamped on my brain. This is an
Hmm.
important story. This is
Hmm.
unusual.
Now, was Bernstein involved early on, or did that happen a little later?
So what that first day, about six of us worked on the main story, including Carl Bernstein and
Hmm.
myself. And
Uh-huh.
then the next day was Sunday. Two people came in, Carl and myself,
Hmm.
realizing that this has
Wow. Okay.
got an odor about it. And then we did our first story together that Sunday, that was in Monday's paper, that said the lead burglar was head of security at the CIA and the Nixon reelection committee. And you know,
Okay. Uh-huh. Hmm. Okay.
and that,
Was that front page? That story?
pardon, yes,
Was it?
sure,
Uh-huh. Okay.
it was front page, and it was it was a mystery. And in the first story, where six of us worked, we asked the potent question. Well, it couldn't not be learned who was behind this, if anyone, who sponsored this, and what
Hmm.
was the purpose of this burglary. And in many ways, the next 2 years to Nixon's resignation was answering that question, those two questions. Who was behind
Hmm.
Nixon? What
Hmm.
was
Hmm. Hmm.
to destroy the Democrats and make sure he was reelected?
Now, somewhere in here, just to switch lanes, which I love to do, you fell in love with the wonderful Elsa. And
That
much later, I guess Phil Donahue hooked you into contributing to a book he did with his daughter, What Makes a Marriage Last. So, what makes a marriage last?
uh, trust and again listening and realizing your uh, which is
Hmm.
easy for me, my imperfections and lapses. And she's very gentle, but she gets to the point when, you know,
Uh-huh.
why are you doing this? What are you?
Uh-huh.
And another, she's smarter than I am, much more. She reads everything all the time.
Uh-huh.
She knows. and so it's a PhD in life, actually.
Uh-huh. 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 Yeah, trust. I have a book coming out, which I think is useful because I think a lot of young guys are kind of lost in space and overwhelmed and whatever. It's called, well, the notion is how to be a better dad in 1 hour.
Uh,
And my notion is that these guys will not read a 400-page book, but they will maybe spend an hour. And my promise is that in that hour, you will pick up some things that will make you a better father. And that's a hell of an hour to spend. But one of the key things you mentioned trust, and one of the first things is consistency. And consistency, especially with your kids, gives you trust. It's like a referee in a ball game. If they're consistent, okay, we can we know how we can play this game. If they're not consistent, it's very confusing.
yes, but
But
may I just, I think inconsistency is important to teach kids and to, because the world,
you have to teach them that.
yeah, the world
Okay.
is inconsistent,
Yes, it
and
is.
you're going to be surprised, and so I wouldn't peddle consistency. I would peddle inconsistency. Sorry to be such a,
Okay, I don't know about parents being inconsistent, so we'll agree to disagree on that one. I totally agree with you about setting, when Jack was 10 or 11 or whatever, I told him, I said, at a certain point, probably when you're 18 or 19, you're going to realize that none of this makes any freaking sense. So let me tell you right now, none of it makes any sense. So that when you're 18 or 19, when it happens, you won't it's not going to surprise you and drive you a little crazy and whatever. And so I always was big on the world it is what it is, and it is inconsistent, and it is, well, just where we started, which is it's never been more inconsistent than it is right now.
yes, I mean, that's one, I mean, it's not a, I mean, we are going through, as I was trying to say, a fracture in history, and I think we really need to pay attention to it because I got to know Trump very well. I did 3 books on him,
Yeah.
and the biggest problem with Trump is he does not examine naturally the consequences of what he
Yes.
does.
Right.
And the consequence management is really important,
Yeah.
particularly for a leader, a political figure, and he doesn't care about the consequences.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. No, I mean, the first thing is obviously spotting problems, and he does it, and a lot of us do that. The next thing are what are the possible things we can do, and then as we're discussing, and then okay, what's the consequence of that? Okay, you're gonna you want to cut down the government a bit, and that's probably a good thing. But where are you going to do it, and what are the consequences? And these people that want it to happen until all of a sudden Uncle Jacob gets fired, and they go, "Wait a minute, yeah, well, don't you think if you're going to cut money out that people are going to get fired?" But they don't think about the consequences. That's absolutely right.
it's the consequences are really important, and you need a method, and you need to have some sort of layout, a plan. Now, and in my interviews with Trump in 2020, the last year of his first presidency, I mean, he just no plan. And at one
Yeah.
point that summer, it was the year of COVID, and I found out he had all these warnings about COVID is coming. It's going to kill 650,000 people, and uh, he ignored it. And
Hmm.
he uh, the interviews, which are all recorded with his permission, you see somebody. Uh, Getting the information. I mean, he could have been a hero.
Hmm.
Have come out and said, "Look, I got these warnings about this virus is coming. It's going to
Yeah.
kill. Let's develop a plan." And
Yeah.
he wouldn't plan. He somehow got this idea that somehow it was better to conceal it rather than level with people. And he
Hmm.
lost in
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well,
2020.
and the vaccine was developed pretty quickly. I mean, in terms of the way governments run, and that was another thing. I mean, he could have taken credit for that, and I'm surprised he didn't.
No, he
Uh,
has, and rightly so. But the problem was in the summer, 140,000 people have died of it. And I did my last interview with him. I think it was July 20th. And
yeah.
because, what's the plan? And literally, he said, don't worry, I'm going to have a plan in 103 days. Uh, I only
Hmm.
later realized 103 days was election day.
That's some plan. Okay, all right.
Yeah.
I mean, you spent a lot of time with them. I mean, it's surprising to me that after the first book or whatever, that he would say, well, let's do another one, but whatever that's all about. But pros and the cons of what's not talked about? What don't people understand about him?
Well, you've got to understand the power of his personality, and you've got to understand, and a lot of people don't like to hear this, but he can be very charming and very
Hmm.
outgoing. And
Hmm.
that year of interviews, when I told him that the book is coming out and he wasn't going to like it, and why am I not going to like it? And I said, well, I make some judgments that are very tough. And I said, what are those? And I said, well, I'll send you a copy of the book when it's done, but they're very severe. And he literally said, oh, maybe I'll get you on the next book. In other words,
Yeah.
strike one.
Did you send him the book before it came out?
No, just as it was coming out.
Uh-huh. Okay, 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 okay. In that same vein, Joan Didion talked about some of your work and criticized sort of the fairness of it, which is interesting to me, especially in terms of the way you've been talking, where you go out and you try as best you can to get the facts. You try to get people to say what they're all about. And I think what she was saying that she wanted you to editorialize more,
Yes, she wanted me to have.
which is one of the problems I think right now with journalism.
Yes, I think so. But it's one of the things, as you know, when you get criticism, instead of putting up a wall and you want to learn from it, and I quite frankly thought she had some points
Uh-huh.
and need to learn from that or try and
Hmm.
how distill out the emotional reaction.
To distill it out or to put more in?
No, put your own emotional reaction out and say, well, maybe that's a fair point rather
Okay,
than,
okay. Oh, you mean in terms of her point of view? Yeah, 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 yeah. Obviously, you've interviewed everybody. I mean, just sort of little portrait stuff. Nixon, who was this guy?
yeah. Nixon, unfortunately, was uh, obsessed with winning, and
Uh-huh.
he worried he was not going to be reelected. So
Hmm.
he set up an operation to try to destroy the Democrats, and he got caught. And
Hmm.
he taped all of his conspiratorial. I
Yeah.
mean, the tapes. At one point in my life, I had them on cassettes, and I would play them in the car instead of music because they're so revealing uh, about him
Hmm.
and concerned with concealing who he was and what he was doing, and
Hmm.
then to secretly tape it.
Yeah. Hmm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, President Trump is obsessed with winning,
Yes,
obsessed with it. I mean, it's really. Because in the golf thing, I mean, I've seen some of the stuff he does in golf, and you go, this is really strange behavior because the guy is actually a very good golfer.
Yes.
Why do you cheat? I don't get it. It's like, you can see it, but he's actually good. He's not. I mean, I have played with some people. They're terrible and they cheat. And you go, okay, fine, you kicked it out of the woods, but you keep hitting in the woods, and but he isn't. He actually is. It's very strange behavior. Um, did you ever do anything with Clinton?
Oh, yes, I did
Well,
books.
okay. I missed that particular. Yeah.
Yeah, and he didn't like the first one was the agenda about his
Okay.
economic
Okay.
policy, and it showed uh, uh, it showed the chaos in the Clinton White House and how
Mm-hmm.
that organized. And
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
frankly, just to be very straight about it, I go back and I've looked at that book, and uh, he did a pretty good job as president on two things. We had a stable economy and there was no war. And
Mm-hmm.
gee, that'd be nice to have now. No
Mm-hmm.
war,
Yeah, that'd be good.
stable economy. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it looks different.
Role model would be good too. Yeah, 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 yeah. I think he's one of those people who he sees all sides of things, and sometimes people like that have trouble making decisions. And I think that's a little bit of a problem, at least in the first term, in terms of that ability to make decisions.
Yes, I think that's correct. But it's um, Clinton is unique, and the astonishing thing about him is he came on the scene, was unknown, and and beat the sitting president.
Yeah,
George,
yeah,
I mean that was amazing, and he orchestrated it, and he knew how to apply his personality, and
yeah.
was
Well, we seem to always be looking for change every election cycle. And if somebody comes in and they're looking for change and they found him to be, he's very smart, he's very articulate, he's great on camera, he's a very smart guy. Which brings me to the notion of um, do you see any viable Democratic candidates out there now? People where you go like, yeah, I mean that person might be able to really help things.